Hello friends, welcome back to a new video, that is MCQs on cell biology, and this is the part 3 of this series of videos on cell biology. So the first question of this video, that is question number 41, that is free fatty acids enter cell by option A passive diffusion, option B primary active transport, or option C cannot enter into the cell, or option D secondary active transport. So the right one is option A, that is passive diffusion. So fatty acids, so free fatty acid enter cell by passive diffusion. Okay, so next question देखेंगे. Next is a membrane transport protein is said to be a carrier protein if it forms an open pore through which a molecule can diffuse, or option B, an electrochemical gradient is necessary for transport to occur, or option C, it only allows transport down a concentration gradient, or option D, it binds to the molecule and changes shape during transport. So the right answer about a membrane transport protein is said to be a carrier protein if option D, that is if it binds to the molecule and change shape during transport. So a membrane transport protein is said to be a carrier protein if it binds to the molecule and changes shape during transport. So option D is the right one about the carrier protein. So move on to the next question, that is select the false statement. So which one is the false statement? And the statement option A is facilitated diffusion is faster than simple diffusion. Option B, facilitated diffusion exhibits saturation kinetics, or option C, facilitated diffusion is not selective, or option D, facilitated diffusion can be inhibited by agents known as denature proteins. So the right answer is option C, that is facilitated diffusion is not selective. So this is the false statement, and this option A, B and D is the right one. Okay, so the false statement is option C, that is facilitated diffusion is not selective. So let's move on to question number 44, that is which of the following is not related to facilitated diffusion? And the options are option A, solutes are moved by a change in shape in the carrier protein, or option B, the process is passive, option C, the process requires energy input, or option D, both A and C. The right one is option C, that is the process requires energy input. So which of the following is not related to facilitated diffusion? That is option C. So the process requires energy input. This is wrong, because for facilitated diffusion there is no energy required. Okay, so let's move on to question number 45. That is the concentration of an electrically neutral substance within a certain type of blood cell is much higher than it is in the surrounding blood plasma. Yet the substance continues to move into the cells. So the process by which this substance moves into the cell is called option A osmosis, option B simple diffusion, or option C facilitated diffusion, or option D active transport. Okay, so the right answer is option D, that is active transport. Okay, so the concentration of an electrically neutral substance within a certain type of blood cell is much higher than it is in the surrounding blood plasma, yet the substance continues to move into the cell. So the process by which this substance moves into the cell is called active transport. Okay, so right answer is option D. So let's move on to question number 46, that is sodium and potassium pump, and then the four statements are there, that is statement P is sodium and potassium pump is a heterodimer composed of an alpha subunit and a glycoprotein beta subunit, or statement Q, that is contains alpha subunit which is responsible for ATP hydrolysis and ion pumping, or Statement R, that is contains multiple transmembrane alpha subunit, or statement S is palytoxin sensitive. So which statements are correct about sodium potassium pump? So the options are option A, that is P and Q, option B P, Q, R and S, or option C P, Q, R and S, or option D P, Q, S is the right answer. So which one is the right answer? Right is option C, that is P, Q, R and S. All of these statements are correct about sodium potassium pump. Okay, so let's move on to question number 47. That is, the transport across a membrane is said to be coupled when option A, two molecules are transported across the membrane in the same direction, or option B, membrane transport is coupled to an energy source such as ATP hydrolysis, or option C, transport of one ion down its gradient provides the energy to transport another molecule against its gradient, or option D, both the concentration gradient and membrane potential determine the rate of the transport across the membrane. So which one is the right one? Right one is option C, that is transport of one ion down its gradient provides the energy to transport another molecule against its gradient. That is known as coupled transport across membrane, that is known as coupled transport. Okay, so transport across a membrane is said to be coupled when transport of one ion down its gradient provides the energy to transport another molecule against its gradient. Okay, so let's move on to question number 48. That is, you wish to design a new drug which will act as an ionophore to deliver calcium across the nerve cell membrane. So this drug would most likely be option A, hydrophobic on the outside and hydrophilic on the inside, or option B, insoluble in lipids, or option C, soluble in proteins, or option D, smaller than 0.001 nanometer in diameter. So the right one is option A, that is hydrophobic on the outside and hydrophilic on the inside. So you wish to design a new drug which will act as an ionophore to deliver calcium 2 plus across the nerve cell membrane. So this drug would most likely be hydrophobic on the outside and hydrophilic on the inside. Okay, so next question देखेंगे. Next is, which of the following are correct about transport ATPase? And statements are, statement P says P, F and V type transport ATPase transport ions only, or statement Q, that is sodium potassium pump is an example of P type of transport ATPase, or statement R says all members of the ABC superfamily contain two cytosolic ATP binding domains. So the right and the S statement says F and V class ATPase do not form phosphoprotein intermediates and transport only protons. So the options are option A, that is P and R statement is correct, or option B, Q, R and S statement is correct, or option C, P, Q, R and S all statements are correct, or option D, P, Q and R statement are correct. So the right answer is option C, that is P, Q, R and S all the statements are correct about what? About transport ATPase enzyme. Okay, so let's move on to question number 50. That is, the process by which a cell secretes macromolecules by fusing a vehicle to the plasma membrane is called option A, endocytosis, option B, exocytosis, option C, pinocytosis, or option D, phagocytosis. So the right one is option B, that is exocytosis. So the process by which a cell secretes macromolecules by fusing a vehicle to the plasma membrane is called exocytosis. Okay, so let's move on to next question, that is receptor mediated endocytosis from plasma membrane requires which one of the following coat proteins? And the options are option A, clathrin, option B smear protein, option C arrestin, or option D glycophorine. So the right answer is option A, that is clathrin protein. So receptor mediated endocytosis from plasma membrane requires which one of the following coat protein? That is clathrin type of protein they required for receptor mediated endocytosis. So next question क्या है? Next is choose the incorrect statement among these four options. So option A is LDL receptor is a single transmembrane glycoprotein, or option B LDL contain a large protein called ApoB100, or option C ApoB100, or option C LDL contains cholesterol in the form of cholesterol ester, or option D uptake of LDL occurs through COP1 coated receptor mediated endocytosis. So the right one is option D, that is uptake of LDL occurs through COP1 coated receptor mediated endocytosis, and this statement is incorrect statement. Okay, so let's move on to question number 53. It is the value of membrane potential in a nerve cell during resting stage is option A negative inside the cell with respect to outside, option B positive inside the cell with respect to outside, or option C both side negative, or option D both side positive. So the right answer is option A, that is negative inside the cell with respect to outside. So the value of membrane potential in a nerve cell during resting stage is negative inside the cell with respect to outside. Okay. So next question is question number 54. So membrane potentials inside and outside of the membrane are caused by the unequal distribution of option A ions, option B fatty acids, option C glucose, and option D amino acids. So the right one is option A, that is ions. So membrane potentials inside and outside of the membrane are caused by the unequal distribution of ions. Okay, so next question is question number 55. The action potential results from option A decrease in negative charge inside the nerve fiber, or option B increase in positive charge outside the nerve fiber, or option C opening of voltage gated sodium channels, or option D activation of the sodium potassium pump. And the right one is option C, that is opening of voltage gated sodium channels. So the action potential results from opening of voltage gated sodium channels. Okay, so next देखेंगे, next is when an ion or solute is moved against a concentration gradient using energy, the process is called option A diffusion, option B transport, option C active transport, option D regulated diffusion. So the right one is option C, that is active transport. So when an ion or solute is moved against a concentration gradient using energy, the process is called active transport. Okay, so next question देखेंगे, next is which one of the following is a correct statement for sodium potassium ATPase? And the options are option A, it gives out 3 sodium ion and takes in 2 potassium ions, or option B, it gives out 2 sodium ions and takes in 3 potassium ions, or option C, it gives out 3 calcium ions and takes in 2 potassium ions, or option D, it gives out 3 sodium ions and takes in 2 calcium ions. So the right answer is option A, that is it gives out 3 sodium ions and takes in 2 potassium ions. So the correct statement for sodium potassium ATPase is option A. Okay, so next is question number 58. That is, which of the following effects of the steroid digitalis is observed after treatment of congestive heart failure? And the options are option A, decrease in cytosolic sodium levels, option B, inhibition of sodium potassium ATPase, option C, decrease in the force of heart muscle contraction, or option D, stimulation of the plasma membrane ion pumps. So the right answer is option B, that is inhibition of sodium potassium ATPase. So which of the following effects of the steroid digitalis is observed after treatment of congestive heart failure, that is inhibition of sodium potassium ATPase. Okay. So next is question number 59, that is the hyperpolarization of the cell membrane associate with the option A activation of voltage gated potassium channels, option B activation of the sodium leaky channel, option C activation of the calcium voltage gated channel, or option D activation of voltage gated sodium channels. And the right one is option A, that is activation of voltage gated potassium channel. So the hyperpolarization of the cell membrane associated with the activation of voltage gated potassium channels. Okay. So the last question of this video, that is the changes in the electrical potential of a neuron that constitute the action potential occur in the following order, and the options are option A depolarization, then resting potential, then hyperpolarization, and then resting potential again. So the next option, that is option B, that is first resting potential, then depolarization, then hyperpolarization, then again resting potential. And option C, that is resting potential, then hyperpolarization, then depolarization, then again resting potential. Or option D, that is resting potential, then hyperpolarization, then resting potential, then depolarization. And the right answer is option B, that is resting potential, then depolarization, then hyperpolarization, then resting potential again. So the change in the electrical potential of a neuron that constitute the action potential occur in the following order, that is resting potential, then depolarization, then hyperpolarization, then resting potential. Okay, so these are all 20 questions of this video on cell biology. Okay, so thank you for watching this video.